Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video, I'm going to do an unboxing of this YesWelder Firstess MP200. This is their first attempt at a 5-function welding machine. At least I think it's their first attempt. This has 4 different welding functions and a plasma cutter all built into the same box. So I will tell you that YesWelder provided me this welder and asked me to do this video for them so that others can see the functions of this welder and maybe help them if they're trying to set it up at home. Now let me also tell you, this has, again, 4 different functions. It has MIG, it has flux core, stick welding, TIG, and of course plasma cutting. And each one of those requires a different setup. So I want to go over each one of those for you and let's see what's in the box. Just to give you some idea, this box weighs in at around 48 pounds. Alright, so I'm going to take this off of the stand, set it down here beside it, and open it up. So there's the first box on top. That looks like it's been knocked open. We'll find out what's in there. Kickstarter limited edition on there. Okay, so that's the oil separator is in this box. I've got a few more items here. I'm hoping I'm not missing anything. Oh, while we're here, let me just show you. That's the on-off switch. You've got a connection back here for your MIG, and then your cutting gas. So we'll get into that later. It's got some screws back here, which I'm going to assume there were 2 little nuts floating around in the box. They look like they match those. So I'm just going to put them on there for now, just so I don't lose them. And then, so here's the front of the machine. I'll go over all these various knobs and connection points as we move forward. And again, this package was open. So it's got some fittings in here. It's got a little bracket. All of that incorporates into this, which is your oil separator. I have set one of these up before on my other machine, so I'll go over more details with that as we move forward, but that's what this is. Now this kit, what's in this bag, now this says Kickstarter, so that's kind of interesting. Limited edition. I don't know that all packaging will have that. So this looks like some instructions here. Gives you some welder settings. We'll go over that in a minute. Okay, so it's just one side, one big sheet. So you could probably laminate that, put it up if you wanted to. It does give you some consumables. Welding description here, front panel instruction, and then your various setups for how you plan to use the welder itself. And we'll go over more of that in just a minute as well. Also inside of this kit there's a feed roller, and this is in let's see, 0.9 and 0.8, which I'm going to assume is millimeters. So we'll go over that as well. And then there's also some Teflon tape and a variety of clamps and some O-rings, at least one O-ring. So we'll look at that too. It also comes with this wire brush, a little bit different than a normal kind of wire brush, pretty wide spacing on those. And I think this is kind of like a chipping hammer. Inside of this bag, we have an air hose, which one hose is going to be for the plasma cutting. I'm going to say it's that one would be for plasma cutting. This will be your connection to your argon or argon CO2 tank. This is your power adapter cable, so you can use 110 or 220. Looks like an extra piece of hose. We'll figure out if that's needed or not. Now inside of this box, I'm going to assume are all the cables. So there's different cable bundles in here. This one is for stick welding. It has your clamp type of holder for your welding rod. That's your ground connection. This is your MIG and flux core wand. This is your TIG setup. And then this one is for plasma cutting. So different bundles for each. And I'll go over the assembly or putting all those together for the different functions as well. But that's what's in the box. Let's move on from there. Okay, so we're at the back of the machine again. There's some information here. MIG 200 Pro. Kind of hard to read, because it's on the back of the welder, but there may be some information you can use if you're trying to set yours up. But let me show you what I'm going to focus on. We already know about the power cord. This is the 220, and again, this is your adapter that'll take you down to 110. Just plug that in, and you can go to 110. Over here, we have our MIG gas in and cut gas. Again, that is your air supply from your air compressor for your plasma cutter. Now let me show you this. This is the water separator or oil separator, or a little bit of both. And the way that this is configured right now, out of the box, there is a plug on this side. And I'm going to show you why that means something. But basically inside of the other box, the secondary box, is a little pressure gauge. And that would thread into this location right here. Okay? And if you do it this way, and you're going to mount this using this bracket, this goes up here, this orange retaining ring goes on top, and there's a little tab that keeps that thing centered. So let's just put that on, and that locks that in. Let's just say you're going to mount that like that, which is fine. That's where it's going to go. The problem is this flow indicator is pointing that direction. So if we turn this around, the flow indicator is pointing that direction. Well, if you're going to put on your fitting over here for the flow to come this direction, then your hose, the short hose provided, if you slip that on to that fitting, it's really going to be hard to get it to get over to that. It's going to put a little bit of a bind on it. Now, what I'm getting at is this separator has another port back here. So what you can do is take an Allen wrench. I think this is a 5/16. You can remove that plug, which is, this one is not very tight. Clean out the stuff, put it back in this side, and I'm not going to make it tight at the moment, and then you can turn this around. So if you take this loose, you can turn this around to the other side, tighten that back down. Now your flow is that direction, and you can put your gauge on this side, and then you can bolt this down up top here. These nuts will hold this in place. So, and those are a 8mm. So you'll tighten those up with the 8mm. And I'm just setting one on there for the moment. But the other thing you'll need to do, if you try to use the way this is configured, where it has two hose fittings, that's fine, but you're going to have to connect your air hose to this side because you want your airflow. So what I do, I'm not going to use that fitting. I'm going to use a male threaded or male end fitting that'll go in this side. And of course I'll put Teflon tape on all that, tighten everything down and hold it in place. And then what I end up with is this hose. If I need to, I can shorten it. If I put that on that side, now I have a short turn to go into this connection. And I can shorten that up if I don't want it sticking out very much. So that's what you need to do to hook up the air supply for the plasma cutting. Now that's all connected. Okay, I'm going to go over some of the connections you make here at the front of the welder. But before I do that, let me show you what's inside the welder here. So this is your feed roller for your MIG function and your flux core. This is your carrier for your wire. So pretty simple there. But I want to point this out. When you look at this polarity connection, let me just get that out of the way. There's a polarity connection here. You've got a positive all the way to the right, and it says gas and gasless, and it has a negative over here. So whenever you're making your connections, in this case the MIG is showing connecting to the positive. So you'll be all the way just as it is right now. That's how it's set up with the strap. But if you were doing flux core, it tells you to take this loose and put it over here onto the negative. These other ones, I don't think it matters. It doesn't necessarily show it connected to either side, and I don't think it's going to make any difference. I'm not saying you need to remove those, remove the strap, that wouldn't make any sense, but these two are the only ones that indicate that they matter. And I'll show you more of feeding the wire later on. I just want to show you the connections right now at the front of the welder. So if we look at the display sheet, for the MIG, again, you would have your positive connected. For the flux core, you'd have the negative connected. But I'm not going to talk about those at the moment. I want to talk about the stick welder. And the reason I'm going to show you this is because it's the easiest one to hook up, and I can put it on and then take it back off, and we'll move on from there. When you look at the way this is configured, the red dots indicate where you need to connect. So the grounding clamp goes to the center port right here. So we'll get the connection for the ground. It's got a little kind of a cam function on the end of that. You line that up, rotate it, and you're locked in, and there's your ground clamp. For the stinger or the lead, again, it has this kind of a cam looking shape to it. That one's going to go to the second port. So you line that up, rotate it, lock it in, and now you have your stinger or your lead that you can put your welding rod into. So that's the easiest hookup, and there's other settings I'm sure that involve the knobs. I'm not going to worry about those at the moment. I just want to show you how this connects. The next one I want to show you is the MIG. Now MIG and flux core, the connection for the stinger is the same. There's no changing that because it is a wire feed. However, it talks about when you flip the polarity internally that you connect the ground to the second port here for flux core, but on the standard MIG function you hook it to the center or the third port. So again, that would go cam in, and that's the clamp. Now of course the other connection is the MIG gun itself, and there's your trigger for making it operate. So to make that all happen, you have to connect it here. So you can see it only fits one way, and it's got this threaded collar that holds everything together. So you just insert that, line everything up, tighten that clamp, that collar, because you're creating not only electrical connection but a seal for the gas flow that is going to go through the gun when it operates. So now I want to show you connecting the TIG. Now this one shows you the ground is going into the second port from the left, and then the gun or controller going into the third port. And again, it doesn't show you any polarity connection. The gun itself, this is a little bit different than what I've messed with before with other TIG welders. But I'm going to put this in, cam it over and lock it in. And then your ground would go beside that, lock in. This has its own hose on the front that would connect to an argon bottle, because a MIG welder uses argon CO2 mix and the TIG should use straight argon. So just keep that in mind. This will mount to a separate bottle out in front of the machine. So let me go over some more detail with the TIG torch. With the kit, you get this package inside of it, and this has all of these pieces inside except for your piece of tungsten. So just know that you're going to have to get this yourself. The way this works is this part and this part go into the same location depending on what you're doing. So if you were to install this into the back of your TIG torch, what that creates is an airtight encapsulator, let's say, for the rod. It'll sit inside of that. If you are using this in a tight space, you can take this off and install this cap. It does the same thing except for it limits the length of your rod. Along with that, you have 3 different cups. They have numbers on them, and that corresponds to the size of this opening at the end. So there's a 4, a 5, and a 6. And you can see there's a difference in sizes. You also have 3 collars, and this is what holds your tungsten rod, and then this piece. And what that does is it allows you to pick your different collar. Let's say you can put that inside of that piece, your tungsten rod, and these are different sizes as well. There's 3 different sizes of these. This one is 1/16 of an inch. This one is 1/8, and this one is 3/32. So in this case I have a 1/16. So you slip that inside of that. That goes together. All of that goes into your torch head, and then you can set this how long you want this to be. So if I'm using any one of these cups and I put that around, you can see that that sticks out quite a bit, and you can bring that back and adjust it as needed. So anytime you want to adjust the length of your rod, you have to take this apart, and this will crimp this together. And it's up to you how much of that you want to stick out. So now you know. This, I've not used this type of TIG torch before, but I'm going to assume this is gas flow. Like if you want to increase or decrease gas flow, that only makes sense to me. Normally, the TIGs that I've used in the past have had a foot pedal, but this one operates differently. So my understanding is this is a lift type torch, which means you would make contact and lift, and it's going to create an arc. Again, this is different than what I've used before, so I can only assume that's how it works. Now we're getting to my favorite tool, plasma cutter. So if you look here, it's got your ground clamp, goes all the way to the left side. So you would simply come over here, cam that in, that locks in your ground, and then your gun or your stinger has a couple of different connections. Also, I'll point out that in the kit you get this plastic container that has consumables, because when you're using your plasma cutter, something has to wear away for it to function. So these are your consumable pieces. I'll go into more of that later, but just wanted to show you that they do provide you with those. And some more collars. These are usually made out of like a ceramic material, so you want to be careful you don't drop these. Now this has multiple connections. I want to point this out. This little collar right here, it was loose in the bag. This nut threads onto this port right here. What this is for is tightening that up. You can slip this over the nut, and this gives you some strength to rotate it without using a wrench. This is your electrical connection, 2-wire lead. It has a little cutout right here on the side, which means that it only fit one way. So if you put that up in, it lines up. This is a little tricky, but it's just an electrical connection. It's not an airtight connection. So you have to get your fingers in there and thread that on. So if you know somebody with little skinny fingers, that would help. Otherwise, it would have been nice to have that out just a little bit further. This part, again, you'll press in on the hose and turn the collar at the same time, because one will help the other fit together. So tighten that up, and that's it. That is it. So we've gone over the MIG connection, the flux connection, the TIG connection, the stick welder, and the plasma cutter. And of course, the gun here has a safety shield on it, so you'll squeeze this to operate it. And whenever you let go of this, just know this machine is going to keep cycling. It does that to help cool off everything. It has to run a certain period of time, so don't shut it off. Just let that cycle until it's done, and then you can turn it off. This collar, again, I believe is a ceramic material. There's a secondary little collar inside of that, and the piece of or the tip right there that goes inside the collar. There's two more of those in the consumables, and then this right here, you take that collar out, that comes out. And I don't know, I'm going to assume that you can turn this either direction. It looks like it'll work either way. So maybe it's a double tip in that respect. I've seen other ones where it only has one side that you can use, and you pull it out and it's gone. But this one looks like you can get a lot more use out of it. So put that collar back on there. Thread this back on. And your plasma gun is ready to go, other than hooking up the air hose, which we talked about earlier. Okay, I've placed the machine on a welding cart, and you can see I have an Argon bottle here on the back. Now this is a standard Argon CO2 mix. Takes the standard type of fitting. And one conflict that I had because of this welding cart is the machine with this apparatus on the back for the plasma cutting connection wants to hit the bottle right here. So I had to put a piece of wood to make it stay away from the bottle because this is at an angle and it's going to want to slide back. At this point I will connect the hose. Now this hose is probably about 8 feet long. So plenty of hose for this. So what I will do is just wrap this hose around the tank just to take up space. See how close that comes? Not quite, but I'll just connect it to the regulator, thread that on. And I will point out, this machine does not come with this regulator. You will have to get your own regulator. So that should be tight. I don't hear any leaks. That's a good sign. Now, of course, this will only be used for the MIG function. Argon CO2 for MIG. So now with the MP200 mounted on the welding cart, I want to show you what we're going to do on the inside here. Now this again is your polarity, where you can change that based on what you're going to be doing. I'm going to leave it set up on positive. It even says right here gas. This goes to positive, gasless. This goes to negative. So this is for your MIG and flux core operation. This knob is a tensioner. You can rotate this and it lets the roller wheel come up, and you can rotate it back up and it locks it down onto the wire once you feed it in. So this increases tension on this wheel to put pressure on the wire so that it feeds. So maybe here you can see it a little bit better. There's the wheel and it comes down and sits on top of the wire. Now here, I'm going to put this up and out of the way for a second. This is your feed roller. There is a knob here. You can remove that knob and remove your guide roller. Now this has a 0.9 on one side, that is for 0.035 wire, and 0.8 on the other side, that is for your 0.030 wire. Now in the kit you'll have two of these. One is smooth, has smooth grooves in it, and the other one has serrations in it. This would normally, from my understanding, be used to feed the flux core, just so you know. So just line up the little groove with the post on the shaft and put the knob back on. Now this is your carrier for your wire. What I've noticed, this one is different than the previous version that I've seen because it has this removable collar. That makes it a little easier to get the wire on there. There's also a post back here. So what that's for is this hole on your wire carrier to line up on that post. The reason for that is it creates tension. This can be adjusted. There's a nut here. You can move this in and out. There's a spring on this, and this just doesn't spin freely. You don't want the wire to just spin freely. You want it to have some resistance. So I will put this onto the carrier, and you can see this is some wire that I've had, so I have to cut the end of this off because it's bent. So we'll get that out of the way. And hold on to that wire. So get that on, and I'm going to line that up on that post. Okay. Put the collar back on, and this collar has reverse threads on it, so you have to turn it counterclockwise to attach it. Now you'll take your wire, feed it into this little guide liner right here. It'll go forward. You have to put it into the hole for your MIG. So this takes a little bit of practice. So this can be a little bit of a challenge based on how much the wire wants to cooperate with you. So I'm going to try to feed this in with a screwdriver and get it into that guide for the gun. And it makes it a little bit more of a challenge whenever you're trying to film this. But there it goes. Feeds in. Then you will put the upper roller down and secure the tensioner. So that is how you set it up for the MIG operation. Now if you were using flux core, you would have to swap this over to the negative, and keep in mind you don't use any gas for flux core. Just waste of material. One more thing I want to point out before we move on. You don't have to use a big spool of wire. This will handle the big spool or a small spool. You just have to remove this nut, washer, and spring. The carrier assembly comes off. You install this, replace the hardware, and you're ready to go. So I want to show you something on the MIG function that is pretty cool. If you remove, just to show you for this example, I'm going to remove the cup or shield, pull that out of the way, and then the tip. These are replaceable. Again, this one is 0.030, and we have two of these that come in the kit, two extra ones that come in the kit. But I want to feed wire before I get started. So I can push the left button right here, and what that'll do is feed the wire into the gun. Now it may take a second because there's a lot to feed, but this is how you get it to come out of the gun. And there it is. Now you can reinstall your tip. And your cap or shield, and you're ready to go. Okay, so let's turn the unit on. You'll see the YesWelder animation there. And this brings you to the first screen that you'll see, and there are three buttons here on the bottom that control what you see on the screen. Let me start off by pushing the home button, and this shows you what you have available. So you have settings, plasma cutting, lift TIG, flux core, MIG, and stick welding. Let's go to settings first. I'm going to hit select. What this allows you to do is choose whether you want inches or millimeters as far as your measurements. So simple enough, you click what you want, click on that, and it'll load that to the machine. Go back to the home button. Now this dial, you'll notice it kind of goes backwards of what you're seeing. So if I turn it to the right, it's actually rotating it left. But on this setting right here where you have your stick welding, you can hit select. What this allows you to do at this point is make some choices. So if I hit select again, these little boxes light up on the top. Click that. That lets you choose whether you want your 60 series or 70 series welding rod. I'm going to select 60. This allows you to choose the size of your welding rod. I'm just going to, in this case, click 1/8. And then memory. What this allows you to do is set up 10 different settings on your memory. So if you have something you like, one particular setting, you can just pick that, go to 1, and select it, and now that is saved. You also see on the screen your amperage and your voltage. Now, we only have a 110 connected right now. What that will do is limit your amount of amperage. So if I turn the dial and I increase my amperage, it's going to stop at 160. Can't go any higher with 110 on your voltage. Let's go back to the home button. So now let's look at the MIG settings. Hit select. These knobs will control amperage and also your rate of wire feed. How many feet per minute. As you can see, it also changes the voltage on the other side. So as you're increasing one, it increases the other. kind of a synergic operation. This one, you can increase the voltage and decrease the voltage. So you can tune it to where you like it. Now, another thing you can do, if I hit the select button, it comes up here to these boxes on the top of the screen. The first one here allows you to choose your type of gas. So you have Argon CO2 mix at 80-20, Argon CO2 mix at 75-25, and straight CO2. I use Argon 75-25. Up here, you can choose your wire, whether you're using stainless or regular steel. I'll select regular steel. Now, on the side you have different wire diameters. So there's 30 thousandths and 35 thousandths. I'm going to select 30, 2T or 4T. Now this would be 2-touch or 4-touch. What that means is, on a normal function of the MIG, if you hold the gun down, squeeze the trigger, it feeds the wire. If you let go, it stops the wire. The way this is designed, or with the 4T function, you can, if you have it on 4T, if say you're running a long pattern on something that it's kind of automated, you can squeeze the trigger, it'll just stay running if you let go of it. You have to squeeze the trigger again and it'll stop. So I never use that, but it is an option on this machine. So I'm going to go back to 2T. This is your metal thickness. So I think your smallest gauge there is 18, 16, 14, 12, 10. Then it goes to 3/16, 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8, and half. Now you're going to be limited with 110 volts, so just know that. So we're just going to go back and I'll just select 16 gauge. This is a burn back button. What this means is it's amount of time that the wire is energized after you release the trigger. So you can tune this if you're having problems with the wire burning back into the tip. So you can tune it a little bit. I'm just going to leave that at 0. And then again, memory function. So if you like this setting, you can save it. And when you come back to it, you can use that memory function. Back to home. Flux core. This is the same setup as you would have with basically with the MIG. You have your choices up on top. There's your steel thickness, 30 thousandths and 35 thousandths. For your wire, I'll just select 30. 2T, 4T. Gauges, again, 18 all the way up to 1/2. Burn back control and memory as well. So here you can increase your amperage and your wire speed, same way as with the MIG function. Lift TIG. Hit select. These, your choices are pretty limited. You can increase amperage all the way up to 160, but again you're limited by your voltage because it only goes to 110 if you have the 110 hooked up. You would have to go to 220 to have your full 200 amps of power. Also, I want to point out, since we're here and this screen is relatively simple, you've got your connection here for your ground. So this is showing a positive connection, which is down below in your lower portion of the machine. Plasma cutting. Now the plasma cutting is the same kind of deal. You can increase up to 30 amps, limited by your voltage. Up on top on this one, you have these screens as well. This is pre-flow and post-flow. That's how much air you want to flow before you start to cut. Like when you squeeze the trigger, it may blow air for a second, so you kind of clean off your stuff, your cutting area. And then as you cut and you let go of the trigger, it has a post-flow as well, so you can set those up here at the top. Those go all the way up to 10 seconds. And that's on both of them. Again, 2T, 4T, and a memory setting. I also want to point out that it shows that the ground for the plasma cutting just goes straight to the regular ground connection. Just to cover that a little bit more, here is your stick weld that shows the ground to the negative. Your MIG shows it to the negative. Your flux core actually shows it to the positive. And again, the TIG shows it as positive as well. We go back to the home. And if you wanted to change something with these settings, you can do it right there.